The story starts in Japan with an ugly-looking guy named Takafumi. He sent some eggplant emojis to Instagram girls to slide into their DMs. Then he crossed the street and Truck-kun drove past. But Takafumi was lucky and didn't get hit. However, he went to the hospital to visit his ugly uncle named Shibazaki. The reason for this was that his uncle was hit by Truck-kun when he was 17. After 17 years in a coma, Takafumi's uncle woke up and greeted his nephew in the language of another world. Takafumi thought that he had gone insane, and his uncle apologized. Suddenly he said that he had spent 17 years in another world called Gran Bahamal. While Takafumi was still shocked to see his ugly uncle gone insane, a cute nurse appeared in the room. She used a thermometer to take Takafumi's uncle's temperature, and he replied again in the language of the world Gran Bahamal. The cute nurse thought it was funny, and ignored the fact that Shibazaki was communicating in a language of another world. Afterwards, Shibazaki told his nephew that he has grown up and asked where the others were. Takafumi replied that after he fell into a coma, the family argued over the decision of what to do with him. He learned that his family fell apart and wrote it down in a notebook. After learning this, he used the Ikuras Quora spell on himself, and he planned to prove to Takafumi that he was in another world. Takafumi thought that he is a stupid baka and he's talking nonsense. Suddenly, Shibazaki used the language of Gran Bahamal to cast a spell. At first nothing happened, and Takafumi didn't believe that his uncle was in another world. But Shibazaki didn't give up, and he managed to levitate a bottle of water in a cup. Takafumi couldn't believe that Truck-kun had really sent his uncle to another world, and that he has been able to use magic ever since. Meanwhile, Shibazaki learned that he had to recite spells in Japanese to activate them. Takafumi was shocked that his ugly uncle had told the truth, and began to imagine the other world. He imagined the other world as a great place with kingdoms, monsters, and heroes. Actually, Takafumi only planned to go to the hospital to sign the discharge papers. At that moment, he decided against it, and he began to admire his uncle as a top G. Takafumi immediately asked what he had done earlier, and learned that his uncle had used wind magic. He was amazed, and Shibazaki showed him that he could use fire magic. Shibazaki then asked his nephew who won the console war, and he hoped that Sega was the winner. Unfortunately, Takafumi had to disappoint his uncle because his favorite console brand had long since disappeared. He said that in Japan, Sony and Nintendo dominate the industry. Shibazaki immediately asked what happened to Sega, and he got an emotional damage after learning that Sega no longer existed. He used the spell Ikuras Quora again, and Takafumi wanted to know what Ikuras Quora does. So Takafumi learned that this spell erases memories, and his uncle uses it when things get unbearable. Following this, Shibazaki said the other world was fraught with difficulties, and he asked if Takafumi would like to take a look. Takafumi looked at his notebook and immediately wanted to erase his memories. He realized that the things he had read were worse than the 2 girls 1 cup video, so he asked his uncle to erase the memories of the notebook. A week later, his uncle was allowed to leave the hospital, and Takafumi decided to make a living by making money off of his uncle's powers. So they decided to make viral YouTube videos to get sponsored by Recap Senpai. Next, they went to Costco and Takafumi bought Wagyu steak for dinner. Arriving at Takafumi's home, Shibazaki realized that the apartment was too big for a single person. Takafumi replied that he had shared this apartment with a roommate. Shibazaki misunderstood something and thought that he had shared the rooms with a girlfriend. Takafumi cleared up the misunderstanding and learned that his uncle doesn't know what a room share is. Meanwhile, his uncle was impressed by the technology that didn't exist 17 years ago. Takafumi understood that his uncle most likely didn't have iPhones in the other world. At lunch, Takafumi asked what his friends in the other world were like. Unfortunately, his uncle's answer was disappointing. He replied that he basically played solo for 17 years. After lunch, Shibazaki said that in the other world, everyone is good looking. Suddenly he said that he most likely looked very ugly to the people there, because he was being hunted like an orc variant. Takafumi was shocked that his uncle was so ugly that he was considered an orc in the other world. Also, his uncle told him about an aggressive person who followed him every day to bully him. Takafumi found it horrible and was shocked that the fantasy life was different than he had imagined. In addition, Shibazaki said that he had even saved this person, who followed him many times, and she didn't even thank him for it. Takafumi realized that it was the typical words of a tsundere and not an aggressive bully. Takafumi remembered that the concept of tsundere became popular around 2004. Since the concept only came out 4 years after his uncle was hit by a truck, Shibazaki couldn't have known about it. However, Takafumi asked what happened to this girl. Shibazaki replied that he didn't know, and he stopped talking about his terrible life in the other world. Then he turned on his laptop and was looking forward to reading through his comments on his first YouTube video. Shibazaki noticed that some viewers were trolling him. Takafumi tried to calm him down because some users called his video fake, like the fights of Jake Paul. So Shibazaki got an emotional damage because he doesn't know how to deal with haters. A few moments later, Shibazaki showed his nephew a phone he wanted to buy. Takafumi said that only drug dealers use these type of phones and recommended that he should buy a new iPhone. Unfortunately, he couldn't talk his uncle out of buying this phone, and Shibazaki said that a man who chose Sega console couldn't live an ordinary life. Meanwhile, Takafumi wondered why game consoles dictate so much of his uncle's life. However, Takafumi began to research the phone that his uncle wanted to buy. Following this, his uncle was really excited about his first cell phone, and he planned to buy one with lots of buttons. Takafumi said that technology is really an amazing thing, and nowadays, most people use touch panel phones. Suddenly his uncle said that he had made a technological advancement in the other world. He said that he created a vase that poured out water in a drought-stricken village. Takafumi wanted to know more about it, and learned that his uncle had used 2 different spells for it. Following this, he used his magic and cast the Apple TV spell to create a screen. As a result, Takafumi was able to see his uncle's memories in the other world. Takafumi was impressed by his uncle and thought that he had dominated the other world with his scientific innovation. Suddenly, his uncle said that it was not true because he was chased away by the people. He told Takafumi that they tried to hang him and his nephew was shocked about it. However, Shibazaki explained that his invention wasn't accepted in the world's religion and a girl tried to save him. Takafumi learned that she was the girl who had been following him all this time. Afterwards, the video continued and his uncle freed himself with magic. Takafumi got angry because his uncle didn't understand that the girl got a crush on him. Meanwhile, Shibazaki thought that his nephew was angry because he thought it was hard to watch his memories from the first-person view. However, he started to swipe on the screen to turn the camera to a different angle. Takafumi was surprised by this feature and asked if they could see what happened to the girl. The girl was disappointed that he ran away again, and Takafumi learned that she was super nice. A few minutes later, Shibazaki turned off his memory video and he received a message about the auction for the cell phone he wanted to buy. He learned that the auction was about to end and placed a bid. Takafumi said he still needed to check the shipping costs, but it was too late. After he bought the phone, he learned that the shipping cost was double the price of the phone. He was disappointed, but Takafumi explained to him that if they picked it up themselves, they wouldn't have to pay for shipping. Suddenly Shibazaki jumped out of the window and Takafumi got worried about him. He learned that his uncle could fly and was very surprised about such a powerful ability. 30 minutes later, his uncle returned, and he showed his nephew the phone he had picked up. Takafumi came up with the idea of using his uncle's ability to save a lot of money, so he showed him headphones that were sold from New York, and Shibazaki replied that it would take him 10 minutes to fly there. A few days later, a package arrived, and he told his uncle that there was a special discount on rice at Amazon. Then Takafumi asked his uncle if he could give him a knife. Suddenly, his uncle handed to him a dangerous dagger, and Takafumi was confused. He learned that his uncle had pulled out the dagger from his dimensional storage. Takafumi was amazed again and asked if he had any other things from the other world. He then took out a sword, but it scratched the walls. So he put it back and showed Takafumi precious material from the other world. Takafumi thought that this would make them rich, but his uncle had to disappoint him. He said that he had already visited a pawn shop and that he would only get 50 yen for it. Next, Shibazaki thought about what kind of video he should make to go viral. Meanwhile, Takafumi wondered if his uncle had these rings because he wanted to give them to someone. He replied that the rings are dropped after defeating strong monsters. Suddenly, Shibazaki asked his nephew if he wanted to talk about relationships. Takafumi replied not really, and he thought his uncle wasn't interested in that kind of things. At that moment, his uncle started saying that his first loves were Sonic and Tails. Takafumi was confused and didn't understand what he meant by that. Then we see Shibazaki as a little child, and he talked about how he fell in love with video games. Takafumi already knew his uncle was a weirdo, but he asked if he had experience involving people. So he started telling a story about a girl named Kaede Nanase. While listening to the story, Takafumi realized that his uncle was talking about a game again, and asked if he had met some girls in the other world. However, he showed Takafumi how he had saved a girl and her family from a monster. He told Takafumi that the girl fell in love with him after the fight, but he misunderstood something. Takafumi was shocked that his uncle thought the girl was in love with him. Then Shibazaki said that he was knocked out by goblins from a blind spot that day. Meanwhile, Takafumi found out that it wasn't goblins, but he didn't want to tell his uncle the truth because it would hurt his feelings. Afterwards, the video continued and we see that Shibazaki was saved by the elf girl after he was injured. After that, she told him that for saving him, he should spend the rest of his life with her. Suddenly Shibazaki approached her and gave her a cosmite ring because he didn't want to owe her anything. He caused a big misunderstanding and he wasn't even aware of what he had done. At the same time, Takafumi was shocked that his uncle didn't understand that his uncle had risen her up. Takafumi asked if giving a ring to a woman has the same meaning as it does in this world. Shibazaki said that it has the same meaning, and we see that at the next town he had sold the ring that he had given her as a gift. The girl was disappointed, but she kept following him. Then they stashed the knife in the dimensional storage and it results with an idea for their next video. The new video went viral on YouTube and reached 2 million views. Then several weeks passed since Shibazaki became a YouTuber, and he realized that the number of his views has been declining. Takafumi said that the reason for this is because viewers complain about his ugly face. He replied that he doesn't care about it and he took it like SpongeBob SquarePants. After that, he told his nephew Takafumi that he is ugly and he is proud. 30 minutes later, Shibazaki planned to stop bidding on online auctions to save some money. Meanwhile, Takafumi was wondering what he had recently bought, and his uncle showed him a magazine, which listed the final result of Sega Saturn Reader's Choice. Shibazaki told his nephew that he couldn't die without knowing the results. Also, he thought that this desire kept him alive in the harsh other world. Takafumi couldn't believe that such a silly thing kept him alive. Afterwards, Shibazaki was excited to know the results of the magazine, and he thought that Takafumi was excited too. But Takafumi wasn't interested in the results, and wondered if his uncle had fallen on his head as a baby. Following this, Shibazaki learned that the winner was a Bishoujo game ported from the PC version. He was shocked by this, and he couldn't accept that a Bishoujo game about bad boys tamed by cute girls had won. Suddenly, Takafumi's uncle got up and went to the balcony. Takafumi just enjoyed the show of his uncle and already suspected that he got an emotional damage. However, he wanted the Guardian Heroes to be voted as the best game, and couldn't accept that they ended up in 197th place. Meanwhile, Takafumi was shocked to see his uncle acting like a crybaby because of a stupid reader's choice. Also, he realized that his uncle evolved to a Pikachu and hoped that he would stop to throw thunderbolts. Later on, Takafumi tried to cheer him up, and he told him that one of the original Saturn RPGs was placed in second. But Shibazaki replied that he doesn't play RPGs because he always loses in these types of games. Suddenly, Shibazaki said that he had an encounter like an RPG game in the other world. He used his Apple TV spell, and Takafumi learned that he was always treated like an ugly monster whenever he got to a village. After the misunderstanding was cleared up, Takafumi's uncle was asked to defeat the Blaze Dragon. He learned that the Blaze Dragon could only be destroyed with the Ice Clan's God-freezing sword. However, he learned that the descendant of the Ice Clan is a bit of a pain in the neck. He learned that the girl's name was Mabel, and he needs to raise her up to break the seal of the God-freezing sword. She told him about a flower that he should collect, and Shibazaki immediately set off. Takafumi thought that his uncle planned to get the flower to raise her up. But he was wrong, because his ugly uncle went straight to the Shrine of Flame and he slew the legendary Blaze Dragon. Takafumi was shocked at this and tried to explain to him that the correct option was to get the Riz flower and bring it to Mabel. Shibazaki was sure that he had done the right thing, and that defeating the Blaze Dragon with an offensive strategy was the best solution. A few hours later, we see Shibazaki returning to Mabel's house, and the village elder thanked him for defeating the legendary Blaze Dragon. Takafumi knew his uncle was stupid and decided to let it slide. In the same time, a package arrived and Takafumi had ordered a Sega Saturn console with 20 games. He actually wanted to surprise his uncle with it, but his uncle just said, "They've got to save up." He wondered how his uncle would react to this and gave him his surprise gift. The moment his uncle held the console in his hands, Takafumi didn't know whether he was angry or happy. Besides, Takafumi told his uncle that he had found his favorite game, the Guardian Heroes. At first his uncle showed no reaction, and Takafumi thought that his uncle would evolve to a Pikachu again. Suddenly, Shibazaki started to smile, and Takafumi was glad that he could make his uncle happy. Also, his uncle planned to test his new console and asked Takafumi to play with him Guardian Heroes. Takafumi was more of a Fortnite player, but he did his uncle a favor. 3 months passed, and we see Takafumi and his uncle walking home. Suddenly he mentioned that the New Year's Eve in Japan is totally different from the other world. Takafumi became curious, and his uncle thought that he wanted to talk about aliens. When they got back home, Shibazaki planned to read the Naruto manga. Takafumi told his uncle that the Naruto manga was finished and he was shocked about it. Following this, Takafumi asked his uncle about New Year's Eve in the other world. He told Takafumi that it was more like a Thanksgiving festival. Takafumi saw the people in the other world celebrating and having fun together. Then we see Takafumi's uncle, and he was an introverted person. He was sitting alone and enjoyed the roasted chicken from Isekai Costco alone. After he finished his meal, he went to his room to sleep. Takafumi couldn't believe that was all, and asked about the elf girl, who always followed him. Shibazaki replied that she wasn't there, and nothing happened after that. At the same time, Takafumi looked at his uncle disappointedly and asked if he wanted to play some games on the Saturn console. Then they played Guardian Heroes, and Takafumi's uncle mentioned that Mabel had visited him that night. Takafumi was shocked that he had left out such an important detail and immediately wanted to hear about it. Then we see Mabel and Shibazaki asked why she was in his room. However, she asked him how she could become as strong as him because she didn't want to be a coward anymore. Shibazaki replied that she was not a coward, and he told her that she can decide for herself how she wants to live. Takafumi was impressed by his uncle, and was surprised that he can also be cool. Takafumi's uncle then asked her how she had spent her life so far. She replied that she had been a recluse, and closed off her heart. At that moment, Shibazaki told her that this way of living is not wrong, and he lives a similar life by devoting his life to Sega. Takafumi was shocked at this bad advice he gave Mabel. Then Takafumi found out that Mabel gave his uncle a second chance to rizz her up. However, she offered him the God Freezing Sword, but he refused and he screwed up again, causing Mabel to have an emotional damage. Meanwhile, Takafumi was also very disappointed at his Uncle Riz's skills and asked his uncle if he would like to eat ramen. After that, they ate ramen and Takafumi learned that his uncle always watches TV on New Year's Eve. Then Takafumi found out that his uncle's favorite show was It's Okay to Laugh, and told him that this show ended too. He was surprised by this, and Takafumi learned that his uncle's favorite hobby was to watch TV. A few days later, we see a girl who was out for a walk. On her way, she spotted Shibazaki talking to himself. Fujimiya thought he was a guy who went insane after smoking a large amount of weed, so she tried to ignore him. Suddenly, her name was called, and she was surprised to see Takafumi. Fujimiya was Takafumi's childhood friend, and he was surprised to see her again after a long time. Meanwhile, Fujimiya also recalled the memories of her childhood friend Takafumi, and she still got a crush on him. Suddenly the wind blew. Takafumi noticed that she is cold, so he invited her to his house and she was surprised that he has his own apartment. She accepted his offer, and Takafumi gave her the address to his apartment. 30 minutes later, she was standing in front of Takafumi's apartment, and Takafumi sent her a message that he was grabbing some snacks from 7-Eleven. He told her to wait inside and she was very excited. Shortly afterwards, she looked around and she hoped that he didn't have a girlfriend. Suddenly she spotted a long hair, and she wasn't happy after seeing this. Meanwhile, Takafumi's uncle was flying home and he came in from the balcony door. He thought that he screwed up because he was sure that she saw his powers from the other world. Suddenly he ran towards her and planned to erase her memories of him. Fujimiya was scared because she thought that a homeless man was trying to rape her. At the last moment, Takafumi appeared, saving Fujimiya from his uncle. Shibazaki tried to explain to his nephew that he had to erase her memory, but Takafumi told his uncle that she is a friend and he stopped the nonsense. He was happy about this and thanked Fujimiya for being Takafumi's friend. Later, Takafumi tried to explain to his childhood friend that his uncle was in another world. Fujimiya didn't believe their story and thought that he was an unemployed man who hadn't worked in 17 years. At that moment, Shibazaki said that he is a YouTuber, but she thought that Takafumi had gone insane. She told Takafumi that she saw his uncle was mumbling to himself out there. Shibazaki tried to clear up the misunderstanding and explained to her that he chats with spirits to sharpen his magic skills. Unfortunately, Fujimiya didn't believe a word he said and wondered why Takafumi was so relaxed. Takafumi knew it was hard to believe and he told her to watch his YouTube videos. Suddenly she demanded that Takafumi's uncle should show her his magical powers. He replied that he can't do anything for free because he was a famous YouTuber with 2 million views. However, Fujimiya didn't know what to do now, and she said to Shibazaki that he shouldn't hinder Takafumi's life anymore. Shibazaki realized that she got a crush on Takafumi and he asked her if she was in love in his nephew. She tried to deny it and Takafumi friend-zoned Fujimiya and said that they are just friends. Suddenly, Shibazaki told his nephew that he is 100% sure that Fujimiya got a crush on him. He mentioned that he watched the entire Evangelion series, and for this reason he was an expert on love. Takafumi was surprised that his uncle had watched the series Evangelion. Following this, he learned that his uncle had watched the series because Sega was one of the sponsors of Evangelion. Takafumi then asked if he remembered the girl Asuka in this series. His uncle remembered the girl, and Takafumi panicked. He thought that his uncle might catch on the tsundere concept. Unfortunately, his worries were unfounded, because his uncle wasn't the smartest guy in the world. Shibazaki revealed to Takafumi that Asuka had a crush on Kaji, which was totally false. Then Fujimiya got angry and told him to stop making assumptions based on anime's views on love. Shibazaki said she was right, and he planned to tell her a true love story. After listening to Takafumi's uncle's love story, Fujimiya began to cry. Takafumi couldn't believe that his uncle had told her a love story about a video game. He cleared up the misunderstanding, and Fujimiya wanted to beat up Takafumi's uncle. Suddenly, he activated his magic power and moved faster than Superman to get behind her. Following this, he used the powers of the spirits and read her mind. He also revealed to Takafumi that she had changed her outfit twice to impress her crush. While Fujimiya was confused, the doorbell rang, and Shibazaki went to the door. Fujimiya wanted to know who he was, because a normal person wouldn't be able to read other people's minds. When Shibazaki planned to deliver a great performance to introduce himself as uncle from another world, he was interrupted by the Amazon delivery guy. Fujimiya still thought Takafumi's uncle was insane and tried to talk Takafumi out of leaving the apartment immediately. Takafumi misunderstood something and thought that Fujimiya wanted to be his roommate. She was happy, and he said that unfortunately, he can't kick his uncle out. While Shibazaki was signing the delivery note, Fujimiya was angry at Takafumi's uncle. Because of him, she couldn't become her crush's new roommate. The following day, Takafumi went to Costco's and he returned with a full bag of groceries. After he opened the door, there was Fujimiya and the elf girl from the other world. Takafumi was shocked by this and dropped the bag full of food in confusion. Then we see 75 minutes earlier, and Takafumi told his uncle that Fujimiya will come over later. Shibazaki smiled and told his nephew that he thought Fujimiya was a very nice girl. Meanwhile, Takafumi wondered how his uncle could think she was a nice girl, even though she had insulted him and called him a stupid homeless man. Following this, Takafumi noticed that his uncle got a message from YouTube. Shibazaki replied that he ignored it because it was written in English. Takafumi used Google Translate and learned that the YouTube partner program had changed. Suddenly, he told his uncle that he might soon be unemployed, and Shibazaki was confused. However, he learned that the recent changes to the YouTube partner program require 4,000 watch time and at least 1,000 subscribers to monetize his YouTube channel. Takafumi checked his uncle's YouTube channel and wondered why he only had 812 subscribers with 2 million views. That's when Takafumi noticed that his uncle had been getting comments on his videos. He answered them and insulted his fans because he didn't like their opinions to his videos. Takafumi was shocked by this and told his uncle to stop insulting his fans. But Shibazaki behaved like a little child, and he replied that his viewers insulted him first. A few moments later, he realized that they were in a tight spot, and he said that it reminded him of the situation in the other world. At that time, the city of Luvaldram's defense magic was broken, and 1,000 legendary beasts were on their way to attack the sealed city. Takafumi asked his uncle why did he mention such a fascinating tale in a moment of crisis. Also, he wanted to know more about it, and his uncle cast his famous Apple TV spell. Then we see the sealed city, and Shibazaki looked at the huge barrier around the city. He wondered why the residents had put up a barrier around the city. Suddenly the elf girl appeared behind him, and she asked if he had the brain of an orc. That's caused a misunderstanding, and the residents panicked, thinking that Shibazaki was a monster. The elf girl explained to the resident that although he is as ugly as an orc, he is a human. Furthermore, as a monster, he would not be able to enter the magical barrier. After that, Shibazaki walked away and the elf girl followed him, using an idiom referencing Chu. Takafumi was surprised why she used a phrase that had to do with an ancient state in China. Suddenly, Shibazaki changed the language of the video and explained that there was a translation error. After the misunderstanding was cleared up, the video continued, and Shibazaki was fascinated by a huge fruit. The elf girl explained where the fruit came from, and she also explained that the magical barrier exists to protect the city from monsters. While the elf girl was talking, Shibazaki cast a powerful spell and crossed laser swords like he was in a Star Wars movie. Following this, he destroyed the barrier with a powerful laser beam, and the people of the city panicked. Takafumi was shocked and asked his uncle why he destroyed the barrier. He replied that back then, he wanted to see how much damage such a magical barrier could withstand. Then a Cyclops appeared and wanted to attack the sealed city. After that, there was also a Titan from Attack on Titan, and the residents thought that Eren Yeager wanted to destroy them to take revenge on the Marleys. Additionally, a huge dragon also appeared, which was most likely a Yu-Gi-Oh card. At that moment, Takafumi thought he was in the wrong anime. Then we see Shibazaki and the elf girl, who planned to stop the Attack on Titan and Yu-Gi-Oh crossover. Shibazaki told her that they won't be able to defeat all the monsters. At that moment, the elf girl took out a sword from her storage room. She activated it, and it turned out to be the new, overpowered lightsaber 2.0 from Star Wars. Soon after, she prepared to attack, and she told Shibazaki that she will protect him. Unfortunately, Shibazaki misunderstood something and thought that she said those words to insult him. Then she cast a boost spell and she became faster and faster in the sky. Shibazaki watched her, and the elf girl was determined to protect her crush and the city at all costs. Suddenly, she hit a barrier and she fell like a bird that flew against a window onto the ground. Shibazaki explained to Takafumi that he asked some spirits to repair the magical barrier. Meanwhile, the elf girl embarrassed herself and the monsters were confused. The residents were happy that they wouldn't die and the monsters left. Despite this, some people were sure they saw something shining in the sky before the barrier broke. That's when Shibazaki showed up, and they suspected he was behind it. At the same time, the elf girl appeared and she dropped her weapons. She said that ancient weapons sometimes malfunctioned and managed to calm the residents with this lie. A few moments later, Shibazaki asked the elf girl why she didn't tell the resident that he had broken the barrier. She smiled and said that he just has to invite her to dinner. Takafumi thought that after that day they would have become a couple, but he was wrong. He learned that his uncle left the city immediately after hearing these words because he believed the elf girl was trying to blackmail him. Meanwhile, his uncle still didn't realize that the elf girl was trying to seduce him, and Takafumi wondered what was going on in his uncle's head. Then Shibazaki had an idea to save his YouTube career. He decided to apologize to his viewers. Takafumi thought that it would be the end of his career because some trolls would start bullying him. He was worried about his uncle's channel, but Shibazaki's fans subscribed to him and accepted his apology. Meanwhile, Takafumi was surprised to see that the internet had a kind and supportive side. After this, Fujimiya showed up and she greeted Takafumi and his uncle. When she entered the living room, she found Takafumi lying on the floor emotionally damaged because he couldn't believe that his uncle's pathetic plan was working. Next, Fujimiya tried to convince Takafumi's uncle to get a real job, and she told him about a report that the aging, unemployed singles are becoming a serious social problem. But Shibazaki wasn't the smartest to understand it. He was just happy that his views had increased, and Fujimiya asked him if being a YouTuber could even be considered a career. Shibazaki replied that she doesn't have to worry about him because he is a pro and collaborated with a corporation. At that moment, she became angry, and she tried to make him understand that without him, Takafumi could find a girlfriend. Shibazaki was a love expert because of the many anime he had watched, and he immediately understood that Fujimiya wanted to move in. So he suggested that she should move in, and said he could sleep on the floor in Takafumi's room. Takafumi replied that 2 men in his room would be very tight, and he somehow didn't understand that Fujimiya had a crush on her. Following this, he left the apartment because Costco had chicken on sale. At the same time, Shibazaki wondered why Takafumi only sees Fujimiya as a friend. He suspected that something had happened in her past, and asked if she wanted to talk to him about it. She declined, but Shibazaki was sure his gamer experience would help her with this sensitive topic. Fujimiya said that someone who only learned about love through games cannot help her. Suddenly, Shibazaki walked out of the room and Fujimiya thought that she had hurt his feelings. Fujimiya felt guilty and planned to apologize because she knew Shibazaki only wanted to help her. She then discovered a strange person in the apartment, and Shibazaki transformed into the elf girl. He introduced himself as Takafumi's aunt, and Fujimiya was confused. However, she learned that Shibazaki was on the toilet, and he used his isekai power to make his lie believable. Next, Shibazaki planned to start a girls' talk with Fujimiya, because he had misunderstood something again. At that moment, Takafumi returned home, and here we are back in the present. Takafumi learned that the elf girl was his aunt, and he stared at her. He already suspected that his uncle had turned into a woman. Shibazaki wasn't about to admit that he was Shibazaki, and tried to convince Takafumi that he was his aunt. Suddenly, Takafumi asked him why he hadn't changed his appearance in the other world, even though he could use such magic. Shibazaki replied that the spell is dangerous and should only be used in absolute emergencies. Takafumi didn't want to discuss it with his uncle anymore, because his uncle got the brain cell of a peanut. He then suggested that he should make a YouTube video with this appearance. He said that they should make a gameplay video about guardian heroes. As a result, Shibazaki forgot why he turned into a woman, and Fujimiya became totally confused. In the evening, Takafumi uploaded the video on YouTube, and Shibazaki wanted to watch his gameplay video, but Takafumi reminded him that he wanted to help Fujimiya. However, he cast his Apple TV spell, and Fujimiya was shocked because she saw Shibazaki's magic for the first time. She convinced herself that it was just a hologram, and Takafumi explained to her that a Sony device created this hologram so as not to confuse her further. Then we see a dirty and disgusting little boy who was annoying Takafumi with mud. The little boy in the video was disgusting and perverted. Meanwhile, Shibazaki wondered where Fujimiya was, and Takafumi said that the boy in the video was Fujimiya. Fujimiya was shocked that she was supposed to be the disgusting boy in the video. At that moment, Shibazaki understood why Takafumi only sees Fujimiya as a friend. Fujimiya got an emotional damage, and she couldn't believe that her beautiful childhood with Takafumi was just her imagination. Afterwards, Shibazaki apologized to Fujimiya, and he wondered how Takafumi could recognize her on the street. Then we learned that he would never forget her. The reason for this was that he had admired her in his childhood. Meanwhile, Shibazaki understood that life isn't always about looks, and he understood that the elf girl didn't intend to blackmail him, but wanted to be friends with him. Afterwards, Fujimiya learned that Takafumi initially thought she was a boy. A few moments later, Shibazaki realized that his new video got a comment. He discovered his video and was surprised to see himself playing the game, but he asked Takafumi why his game screen wasn't shown in the video, thinking that no one would watch it. Then he realized that his video had already gone viral with 200,000 views. Takafumi celebrated because his plan to make a video about a gamer girl worked. However, Shibazaki read through the comments and remembered the results of the Sega Saturn's Reader's Choice. He became angry and turned back into a man. Meanwhile, Fujimiya was shocked by this and didn't understand what had happened.